Okay, so good morning, good morning. I missed this meeting yesterday. CCSD had a board meeting about AB 469. And that was when the legislators put a whole lot of information in the pot to determine how they could meet the needs of all children. And they gave the principals an option to use temporaries in high poverty schools and then get the kickback because they weren't even paying the subs health care. I mean, this is just atrocious because they're affecting the students' ability to achieve. And so let's just all understand what I'm really talking about as we're moving forward in this investigation of the subcommittee for AB 469. It's a subcommittee meeting and it was amazing. There we go. And then I think that's it. That's it. I don't know what that thing is, but what the tool is, but this is what they're using. And I'm not signing. I'm going to push play and move forward to make sure that you get. Here we go. Everybody understand this.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, one nation, under God.
This is interference.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Lola. Okay, we are going to move on to the item 2, adoption of the agenda 2021. My name is Lisa, and I would like to make a motion to adopt the agenda with the following change. Reference material has been provided for item 3.01, implementation and compliance with Assembly Bill 469. 2007.
These are the federal regulations. It's funny. They don't understand. But they will.
There's a motion by trustee Guzman, a second by trustee Williams. All those in favor? That motion carries 3-0. We are going to move on to public comment period on non-agenda items. Do we have not here? Yeah. Okay. Do we have any yellow? Do we have yellow cards or? I got to pull one out. Okay. So you can do that. You're just gonna stand somewhere in that vicinity. Stand. Oh, I'm scared. Oh, there's good. Why don't I? Which one do you? You're right on time. I can't sit. Oh. No, you just gotta stand up here by the flag somewhere for public comment on are we doing 2 minutes or 3 minutes? 2 minutes. All right, so let me just get her next to this. Is there ready to go? Okay. All right, I'm Steph speaking as an individual. I want to put on the public record that even though I often speak as an individual, I am a proud member of the Education Support Employees Association, and I support KSK President Shannon Rogers. Even though I do not always agree with them, I will always support what they stand for.
Why is this happening?
I'm hoping, well, this was not this agenda, I did not do correctly. Let's go to this. There are 1,000 vacancies at CCSD currently. Teachers, ESPs, administrative. Partly because of the pandemic protocols were too much for many people working in classrooms. Fear and panic influenced us. Now people are leaving because of unrealistic expectations and lack of support. All the political infighting, all the ups and downs, and back and forth, policies and politics. And now an economy that is spiraling out of control, causing the need to wonder, would I be better off somewhere else? And they still haven't solved the substitute teacher crisis. So are you going to create a full-time position with benefits for subs? There was a successful position getting benefits for subs day-to-day who were working in high-risk schools. There are also insurance for subs back in 2016, which I just got a hold of a copy of documentation on that. And I didn't bring it with me, I left it at home, I apologize. Now is the time for all CCSD bargaining groups to come together and support one another in working with for the greater good of all employees and hence our children. All schools need all employees. All employees are part of the team that educates and services our children. I'll stop there and have one. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the first name stage. Read the poems, America City Council. Maybe green chair on the side. And I'm gonna be again. And do you want to go?
Yeah, I filled out 3.1, I'm not just like,
Okay.
so, let me take off my hat for formal.
Okay.
I'm really informal, so I apologize for that, so, thank you, Lola. My name is David Dawson, speaking as the individual. First of all, I do appreciate actually this body being created. You know, I know the state board could look at these issues for 18 or 19 months, but this is the first time the trust has actually got something like this. So when we had the original bill, we were having the advisory committee, technical advisory committee. We had Lydia Young, President Young sat on there with the superintendent for Cal people. You never had any feedback from me back into this. So I see this as not only an opportunity just to deal with the issues within the state board and the school board, but I think there's other issues underneath. I know, Lola, you mentioned when you were president, the idea of putting the agendas on. The previous president said they didn't want to do that. There's other underlying situations that the district can do to help make this better. So I feel like there's an opportunity to actually have a conversation, not just with the state board, but with everybody into this. So I do appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other members of the public for non-agenda items? We are going to close that out. We're going to move on to agenda item 0.01, implementation and compliance of Senate Bill 469, parentheses 2017. I'm going to start this by saying there is obviously a reason that I'm subcommittee. I do think that to echo that sentiment, I think we have an opportunity to lay all of our cards on the table, be very honest about what we would like to occur, and then work through this situation. We need to rather focus on students and student outcomes. And I want to get there. So that's why I'm in my choice. So you can tell us how we get there.
Yeah, Lola, would you like to make a public comment? Can Paul want to get on the bottom? Do you want to?
Do you guys want to comment on anything before, or do you want to hear public comments? We're really just winging it, as said, the board has absolutely never done anything like this, so it is new for everybody in this room. But if you guys want to do public comment first, that's fine. Is that your part? Okay, perfect. All right, we'll do that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we're really winging it here. I like it. And it's a fun meeting.
I do have 2 minutes here. Kim Hall, principal of W9 Middle School, about 70 miles north of here. To a point, I understand the struggle. There are 374 schools and SOTs, but the law says you have to treat each one as a precinct, almost precinct. As school site leaders, our job is to our school community. We try to advocate with our SOT for our students, families, and community. There are numerous struggles for autonomy and implementation over the last 5 to 6 years. I know this isn't complete, but just kidding. In year 1, how can we be proportional and still be down 2 teachers? Hold $1 more for rural schools, the following year was proportional. Utilities, from the beginning, wanting to negotiate, not contract out, service level agreement to control elements of our HVAC, irrigation, lights inside and outside. The concept was better efficiency would result in kept savings at the precinct level. 85% of the unrestricted funds to precincts convinced the state that SLAs were an illusion with no control or discretion. We know what happened with the rush decision on December 9th, 2021. Down gardeners in Virgin Valley and Water Valley for years, yet they can't negotiate a service level agreement or contract out. In July of August 2021, CCSD negotiator and association and MDND Virgin Valley principals drafted a memorandum of agreement regarding a pilot program leading to the implementation of identified provisions of AB 469. This was stopped cold by Central. Math books, one size fits all. Carryover, Moapa Valley helped the state listen to the issues with access to the caregiver. That did change. Teachers make the biggest difference. No forced placements. And there's attorney general legal appeals. As a school site leader, their job is to our school community. We try to advocate with our SOTs for our students, families, and community. I will speak again at the end, but now CCSD Chief Strategy Officer publicly holds that statements of CCSD non-compliance are defamatory letter and a state vote.
And would it be possible for me to get that copy of your comments?
Yes.
You handed to Kelly.
Yes.
Thank you. Do we want to go now?
I'll speak now for you. Okay, so I'm Tamara speaking as an individual. I've been following this. And I understand that you have to be compliant with both. Okay, and I'd love to be one of the people to help you get there, but nobody's will reach out to me much except through the union. And I believe I know this issue inside and out. I understand principals wanting to have their own staff and wanting to choose everything. I think if I was running something, I would want to do that also. But we are part of the school district. And I would tell you, I just think the principal of my new school for next year, and she's fabulous. I'm so excited, probably one of the best principals I've met in 24 years. But I've been in schools with principals who don't talk to support staff. In fact, I don't even know our names after 2 or 3 years. I've been in schools where I've seen principals make very bad decisions and treat children worse than they treat animals. Okay, so I'm not of the belief that all principals are all good. SOT teams are not effective. They are not effective at all. You have people who are, if they don't go along with the principal and they're part of the staff, they're targeted. You have to do it off the clock when, in your free time as a volunteer. Not everybody has the time or the money a lot. Some work 2 jobs. Okay, so those things are not really working well. And everybody says, oh, we checked in. They're not. I'm telling you the truth. You can believe what you want to believe, but they're not. That's part of a big, big problem. I'm concerned with the whole issue of surplus. That is my biggest concern because I've been a long time support staff. What is it? 15 years in the district and then 7.5 as a sub. But if I feel that I'm valuable, I feel I'm a hard worker, I'm reliable, I love children. And yet, if a principal doesn't like me or doesn't like that I come and speak at these meetings, which I've been told by some not to speak, and then been disciplined after, that's a problem. So I will say more later, but there's so much to be said.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
2 minutes is number. Again, while speaking as an individual, I'll agree with Autumn on 1.2. I don't think all principals are great, and I think this law actually shows what a principal's not doing a good job. I'm from Los Angeles. I was still at USD. I had a similar system. School site council, when SOT voted against the budget from the principal, that usually got someone's attention higher up, like what's going on. But I do want to comment, at least on the agenda item on page 2, allocation of school funds with the possible compliance. I don't understand how you'd be possibly complying on something. It's almost like being possibly pregnant or half pregnant. And reading that to the conversation here, so I had a lovely conversation with Irene, I'm trying to get formal, about sort of what is in that concept of it. And what it is an argument from the 2019 legislative session. That was the whole SB 469 conversation. The legislature, back here, and I had a long discussion in the assembly with the chairman of Edward Flores on that. And ultimately, they looked at that, they said, okay, we see what the district wants to do. They talked about it, and they eventually gutted it and said, we're not going to do that. We're just going to keep the law as it is, except to change for the staff. And so when we talk about legislative intent, it's pretty clear what the legislature wanted to. They had an opportunity to change it, but said no. So that I just wanted to highlight into it. I apologize, I may leave early just because I have another event with the school board of candidates at 5:30 at the Park County Library, if you guys want to go.
We'll try right now. I'll be here.
Yeah, 5:30, 7:30, so that's about it. I know that's on the record, but thank you. That's why I might be here. Okay.
Okay. That's all we have for public comment on this item. So I'm going to kind of my intent, there's 2 things that I think would be beneficial for us. Coming into the line and yet what that meeting's all about. One of them is this issue of compliance. And the other one is broader, and it's actually making something useful happen where we map out what these policies look like and what would need to be included in those so that this is very transparent for the community and everybody knows what's supposed to happen, what an appeals process is and how to. That's the gist of what I'd like to accomplish. how we're gonna do it. Not exactly sure yet. Well, do you want to talk? You don't come to you.
No, I need to start with my disclaimer.
Okay, what is your disclaimer?
Well, as a board member, I'm like you are,
Yes.
in that I only have authority when I'm in state board meetings.
Correct.
So I don't have authority right now to talk about what the board's view is. I mean, I can talk about my view is,
Gotcha, you
which is totally dangerous. But, so, and as this process continues and we understand what you're after, the board may empower someone else to come. Okay? I'm just what you get on short.
We appreciate your honesty. Actually, we have three, so just three trustees. We can't vote on anything and make it a binding action. That's why we're here for an informal, because this is a subcommittee. We have to have some level of knowledge, like under open meeting law, notice, etc.
So, I mean, I would just, I sort of always start with history because, you know, when you get old, that's all you have left, right?
Again, you and I are speaking the same language.
Is the context of what was attempted. Okay, you know, 2015 session, there was a bill designed to break up the programs. Was going to allow municipalities to vote to exit the system. And very similar to the current initiative position. And this was also about the time when I think people sort of understood how the substitute teacher funding works. There was the funding difference between the average teacher salary and what a substitute made. And that for all the substitutes that were in serving schools in lower income neighborhoods, the central office was making money off that. There was a $50,000 kickback that came back to the central office and was being used to fund central office efforts and being used to subsidize schools in more. There was sort of a general angle at that. And politically, candidates would just say, there's no use giving the district more money because it's never going to be central office and make it down to the bosses. This is the environment. There was a compromise that was reached to try to move to site-based decision, this autonomous model. The district had some very big success in running empowerment and autonomous schools that showed significant improvement in student achievement. They brought in Michael Stravinsky from Edmonton, and they had very good success. The idea is, how do you give parents and teachers more say in their local schools? And so the model, the compromise was reached, and if you read the NRS 388G500, the findings of the declaration, it's pretty clear. The intent of the legislature was to decentralize the system, transition to a more decentralized district that operated on site-based decision-making, forming these teams, attempting to, I guess in a way, they were looking to try to get the best of both worlds. They were trying to create an opportunity for schools to customize the delivery. Okay, because we at state board level, we set state policy, but we also try decision making people in districts, right? Coastal counties or as another county. So White Pines County has schools that are so rural, they're from, okay? And so for us, the districts know their students there, okay? And it was the same sort of idea that the principals and the staff and the parents of the school know how to customize school, plus the district is so big, you have in essence rural districts embedded in your district, okay? For a long time, like Malacca Valley and Ski, they really chafed at being treated like they're just part of the interstate. So the idea is how do we push, or the legislature, how do we push the decision making down to create opportunities to customize and innovate? As it was described to me at the time, it was moving from a centralized district that had a culture of fear designed to protect the status quo to a decentralized local school decision model designed to promote innovation to improve students. Okay, so there was a lot of confusion. Okay, it was had bipartisan support. It had really broad communities on, look, this is what we can do to empower these schools to generate innovation. Okay? And so that's really the spirit of what the reorg was supposed to do. It comes with a whole set of specific statutes, but the intent is to push down decision. It in essence says that determining what's best for students is no longer solely in the domain of the central office. That the local precincts have a say, in essence, in that process. Okay? So it's not a matter of coming down from the mountain like Moses with the policy written in stone and saying, you know, God told me this is what you can do. At least from my perspective as state board member, because that's, we solicit the input from the districts because we want to know what leeway there is in the policy that we send down. We create opportunities for them to customize and opportunities to innovate. And what are the non-negotiables? What are the guardrails? So, so I think what has caused a lot of grief, is the feeling that the spirit and the hope of what was supposed to happen about all this. Now we got started on this state board because we constituents were reaching out. We had CCA, had a complaint that principals were not honoring their protection under the law for teachers versus substitute teachers. We got complaints from principals that the district was not their ability to select staff. There were concerns about career growth. So there were general concerns that the district had never made a move to a decentralized, that the spirit had never happened. There were concerns that the local precincts legal ability to make decisions and choose products being denied by the district. Right? And then just the general, there was a general complaint that the district was using fear and intimidation to attempt to claw back the decision-making authority that the law had given to the local precincts. So we were presented with that. The law gives the state superintendent enforcement and gives the state superintendent long and special authority that the superintendent doesn't enjoy outside of the reorganization. And gives the state board the authority to write new regulations to try to implement. So the state board asked the Department of Education to start the process of investigating the problems. Okay? Is this happening? What's going on? What are the hangups? Why has the hope and spirit of the law not occurred? What are the processes? And we started a process, which I've gone on for a long time, of soliciting input on what's working, what's not working, what are the problems? And then this is the process we go through, because what the state board needed to get from the Department of Education, are there opportunities for the state board to create new regulations to clear up the problems, clear up ambiguities, fill in holes, clear up definitions, and that's the process we've been going through. Trying to negotiate between stakeholders, trying to come up with something that I think of in terms of broad compliance. That people, we get enough people that are okay with this, and it's this. We had the CCSD ask us for a definition around direct supervision. So we stepped in to try to mediate and bring, what are the problems, to try to bring the district into compliance. And so that's been our process, is a process of bringing the district into compliance while showing that after 5 years, we are serious about bringing the district into compliance. So I think the biggest thing is that there is a spirit and intent around the law that can be subverted. Okay? That an argument for compliance doesn't actually mean that spirit. Okay? I mean, this was the compromise for breaking the district. Okay? And there was a lot of hope in this community that this could be transformation. It had great effect in it. So that's the process we've started. We've been meeting with people, we've been developing regulations, draft regulations to go through the process. So, I got to talk to you. So just the part of it is conveying the spirit. Okay, this was a fundamental change to the law and had a fundamental impact on the organization of the district. Okay, so part of our effort to reach out to the trustees is making sure the trustees understood, and part of our regulations on training, making sure the trustees understand what the hope was, what is the law, and make it part of the process. Because some of my concern, when a trustee at a meeting says they have training on the reorganization law, I mean, that's pretty scary to us, because this was supposed to be transformation. This is a fundamental piece of legislation. This dictates how decisions are made at CCSD. And so when I look at it after doing policy for 10 years on this, I'm expecting, as the trustees develop goals, that this is part of that. This is part of the process. As the trustees develop policies, how this seems like part of that process of developing policies. Okay? And when there's no opportunity, there's no agenda items where there's feedback from the districts or from the precincts, how is this working? What are the roadblocks? Okay? What do we need to do to make this work so that parents and teachers are getting the voice. I mean, parents don't feel heard, teachers don't feel heard. And this was an attempt to create a culture that would allow them to be heard, make them, as it's described by people in Edmonton, empowering them as part of their daily life at that school. So I'm giving big descriptions of the spirit of what was intended to happen. Right? Because this is, you know, it became a test for CCSD that we're not going to, the legislature's not going to rewrite this issue. This is a test to see if the district could be reformed. You know, could the district operate in a way that empowers parents and teachers and still get some of the benefits of being in our schools? So part of our effort to step in is, hey, to fail this test. We want the district to pass the test. We want the spirit and hope of what was intended. We know this has been working in Edmonton. We want it to work here. We want people to feel like the school their kids are going to is customized for those kids. This is a big old district. And, you know, Milwaukee Valley is really different than, you know, Owens and Pecos, where I grew up, to Rancho High School. I mean, it's just different. And so when we talk about, again, this is just, right? The state board may have, it's the broad strokes are trying to capture the spirit and hope and making sure the trustees, this is why we've been reaching out to trustees, you're the governors of the district, making sure this becomes part of that culture so that you know, come this session, you know, when the legislature is looking at this sport initiative, they go, Mark, did it work? You know, it'd be nice to say, yeah. So.
I appreciate it. I do. I will, because like, I'm not from Nevada. I learned about 380G right after I got elected. I drove out to Milwaukee and Kevin, a whole bunch of this. Our team members took me out and kind of showed me the area and stuff like that. So now that I have Indian Springs, I actually have two sets of different rules that ski, Virgin Valley, Indian Springs, Milwaukee. And then I also have the suburban schools and the urban schools. And so again, there's every policy I vote on is like who's going to suffer the least as opposed to who's going to benefit the most, which is unfortunate because it's not what I got into this for. So, but I think, and the thing for the history of that, because I appreciate that. I think we get all of that internal working emotions from that. But one thing I recognize, so I just looked at the first time because Lois said, you know, where do we start, right? For me, I'm like, well, let's start at item number one. Item number one right there, where we're not compliant with authorities to set school staff. And as I'm reading it, and then as I'm reading the law, which is 610, right, where it talks about select for teachers and administrators, other than from the principal, who's a superintendent. And then I read why we're not in compliance. You know, it says that we're not in compliance because of the unions, as opposed to, I want a union bash, I want to do that, that's not what I'm doing. But that was not, okay. Listen, I'm not a union basher, right? But at the same time, I don't know if the unions were apparently supportive of 380, right? And they were supportive of doing this, right? And I see I was head shaking, because I agree, right? Because I know that they really weren't, because how do you become compliant when your unions won't even work with you? Your bargaining units aren't willing to come to the table and say, yeah, you're right. This principal should be able to have rights to hire his own staff, his other staff members or whatever. And I understand the need for favoritism, or people want to do favoritism or whatever, and that's what we talk about. And you said, well, that's how you can tell truly what school's doing well and what school's not doing well. So to me, do we invite our bargaining units to come talk to us during this. Just start talking to the unions and say, hey, listen, like this is the law. You guys are actually actively impeding our progress with this law. And so then at that point, do we start fighting back against the union? I'm not sure about that, but that's what I'm saying. Like, where do we start? Agenda item number 1, right? Like, here's why we're not compliant with this one section. I'm not talking about any other section. We're not compliant with this section because of the unions. So how do we fix that? That was my thought process. Because I don't think it's anybody that doesn't want to be compliant with it. I know that some of the staff members are working really hard on it. I want to be in compliance with this. But how do you do that when you have unions actively pushing back at you, saying we're not going to help you? Because then our worst teachers or our worst support staff won't get jobs because nobody will want to hire them.
Mhm.
Well, I really, she doesn't know.
Mhm. She funny.
Anyway,
You can give me advice.
I'm gonna address it. Yeah, I'm gonna give you a buffer mark. So unions are not pushing back because they don't want to be in compliance. Unions are pushing back because they have a different interpretation of the law than the district does. That's it. That is the division. That's the reason why we came to the State Board of Ed and asked for a definition of direct supervision, because there's a division in how the definitions of the way that they look at the law. I mean, lawyers can do anything. It's like a teacher can look at a standard and create a lesson that they want to do based on the standard that they're supposed to do. They can manipulate it, so can lawyers. And so the way that the law is looked at is different from every perspective. No two people I have talked to on this law has the same interpretation of direct supervision, unless you walk in a union hall, and then they do, because they're all on the same page. But that is truly, I don't think that the unions do not want to be in compliance. I think they do. I just think that through the negotiations process, they have action and the district has theirs, and because the State Board of Ed has stepped in, there's going to be legal action. I mean, that's just the way this works. And it's not like they're doing it to be mean or obtuse or anything like that. It's just because they want a definition. They want to say, okay, everybody come together, this is it, this is the final decision, this is where we're going.
Let me give you another one. I know that is part of it, right? And I think you're both saying kind of the same thing, right? There's not a universal understanding of what the definitions are, and there's disagreement. And that disagreement is not just union and it's also the state board and there's a lot of misunderstanding about what is or is not within the scope of school organizations and what schools do have control over. So I think a lot of that has to look to you. And I think I'm going to be very honest. I would be on my first name is so I feel like it's warranted. You cannot legislatively mandate a culture change. It doesn't work. And any organizational change that you would like to make where it involves culture is 10 or 20 years in a giant bureaucracy like that. But I don't like culture change, and I support change that absolutely will help you do it. And I'll go above and beyond to actually make this workable, because I think it's the right thing to do, and I do think decisions should be made at schools. However, I have the fiduciary duty as an elected official to make sure that there's no fraud occurring, to make sure that student rights are protected, to make sure that equity exists. Like, those are things I'm legally responsible. So yes, I want to do that. I want to be in compliance, but I also want to be very honest about it. But I do not think like there has to be some oversight for schools. I think you would agree that they can't just be doing whatever. There has to be some kind of guard. So when we did this joint meeting with you, I expected the state to give us some guard. Right? That's the kind of help that I envisioned. happening. And it's not. So that's why I'm here, because that's the help that I am asking for and that we need in order not just to get into compliance, but to do the right thing. This is a lot of time and energy for every single person spending all of their focus on, and it's frustrating. My candor is very frustrating because I really thought the state board was going to give some sort of guardrails, and even asking for 2 definitions to be defined. Like, how long is that? That is, at the end of the day, we are also at the mercy of humans. We're at the mercy of lots of people. But this could be a collaborative effort to actually define these terms, to come to some universal understanding, and to hold each other accountable for those things. And that is what my commitment is in this person.
So
I'm done. I agree with you. I have no response.
we can't, we're 5 years down the road. And so I don't negotiate. You can't tell, why your district couldn't do it in 5 years. Okay. We got involved and we tried to find areas that were causing different interpretations, using our regulatory authority to define those terms. Okay, and it has taken time. We spent a lot of time with CCAA and the administrators trying to thread a needle between 2 parts of the law. And that's how we ended up defining in good standing and grace and possible. So we are, well, I would say we're not happy. Well, I'll talking about me. I mean, it's not entirely clear to us why it couldn't happen, but once we got involved, we decided we would try to help them. If the district wants guardrails and guidance, you can ask and maybe the board will take it up. Okay, we have a hole in the middle. Okay, and we very much try to not step on the streets. Okay, you are the government, you're the elected officials. We have a lot of respect for them. So we try to stay in our lane to give you the flexibility. I mean, you know your district way better than we know your district. So I don't know, maybe it's done. We'll know this well. But we don't want to overstep. I mean, we're engaging because we see the trustees as the key element. Okay, the culture change starts with you. Okay, the law asks the culture of the district to change from centralized model to decentralized, site-based decision making. Okay, and so I don't know what the rest of the board thinks. We're happy to have, okay, because we want to be working as a partnership with the trustees in bringing the district to compliance. Okay, because that's the path forward, at least the path forward. Is when we get the trustees on board, the intent, where the breakdown is. And part of the complaint we got a lot of times is that there are different interpretations, and the district was taking interpretations that maybe no one else.
Should be willing to share those communications with us, and because I think part of my frustration is also you have a part of the story. You don't know the whole story. Certainly nobody from the NDEs actually ever asked me with any of the board members, as far as I know, one on task with any of these questions. So I don't understand how we can make those assumptions that nothing has occurred if no one has been fired. So is that not part of the investigation part?
I would say that the department is gonna talk to your department.
Yeah.
Right, when it comes to talking to trustees, that's really it.
Okay, so as far as I know, we have made an effort to reach out to, I'm gonna speak for myself. I have made an effort to build a bridge between these two boards by being here. I believe in having collaborative relationships with absolutely everyone, even people I don't agree with, and I'm not saying I don't agree with someone, it's just, it's in my nature to do that. So, like, while this is happening and these things are bubbling up in the state, at no point in time did anybody from the state board reach out to a member of this board, as far as I know, to actually ask if any of these are valid, or would any of these complaints that you're getting are based in reality, or if any protocols or I don't know, I think that would have been a step.
So can I jump in? So in my, and now as my current role, so the protocol is because the state board has requested for NDE to do the investigation. So formal questions go to Superintendent Jara, and in those formal requests for information, to gather information, to ask those questions. Each time the president of the board is always included in the communications and in the responses.
Right, it's just a board conversation.
I realize that, but they have requested that NDE do that part in asking those questions, and so the inclusion of board members is that President Ortiz, the president of the state board, is always included in the communications, and so is the president of the board trustees. So
And we do receive those. When you submit a list of questions and our staff answers it, the full board is made aware of the fact that we are responding to your questions. So it's not, we are aware that this corresponds. I guess for me, if a member of public were coming to complain about the state board, for instance, to me, and I had a relationship with a state board member, I would say, hey, what's going on, or something. Luke? Oh,
So as part of those questions that we asked, especially, a lot of the questions especially in the very beginning and stuff that I'm just giving you an example. Some of those questions were to ask if are it's true, because some of them, for example, one of the things that came to the state board was that the principals were hiring subs as a practice to save money. And so we asked the Clark County School District to investigate that and ask if there were any formal investigations, or if anybody had ever been disciplined for this practice. Is that a practice? And that result was shared back out to the state board to say, yeah, no, these things are not happening, so that they can just move on from there and say, okay, that's not true.
So when it comes to this list of items that you have stated at some point that you feel that the district is not in compliance with, when it comes to these items, which one of these items did you reach that you feel that you investigated fully, and that you still found that there either wasn't a practice or policy that dictated the terms of this? I know the 85-15, so let's put that aside, but the other things that are in this list, and you don't have to answer this right now because I know I'm putting you on the spot. I just want you to think about it, because this is how I want to frame this conversation. You have some stuff bubbling up from us to the state level, and you're getting some testimony, and your testimony, it seems like you're taking that as gospel in some instances and saying that we're on. So walk me through that investigation process. How do you investigate these specific issues before proceeding? Is there like a method or something that you?
So I have never said that the district is not in compliance. All my slides say areas of concern, etc. So And those are items that have been brought to the board has asked for the school board.
Okay, so you inquire about them, you inquire about these specific I'm just trying to picture the investigation part. So you say, hey, somebody from this school is saying such and such. How does that investigation, what is it? Do you get the inquiry at the state board and then you inquire, is that a process or not? Do you understand what?
Yes, I do.
At least I'm
Seems to be my job. So what she's asking, like, for example, when we are looking at the law, there are certain things that we have to provide through essential services. But anyway, one of them is IT, right? So when someone comes and says to you, we are not following the law because we are not allowing a school or a few schools to utilize a software because it was not approved through the district to be utilized. And we're in charge of IT, but yet it seems like the state board of ed is saying that no, they should be allowed to utilize software instead of looking at the law the same way that the district. And that goes back to the other.
Sure, so the Department of Education has the right to interpret those laws.
Okay, and so even if IT is defined in an NRS, is what she's asking, I think, I'm hoping I'm getting right.
So, yeah, so I see where you're going with this, and so all of this has been communicated via email. So I would request it from CCSD leadership, so you can see both sides of that conversation.
So that's how you're investigating. So see, this is her question.
So
So what you're doing is whenever these types of issues come up,
Yes.
you go directly to our leadership and you ask for specific things, and then you share your interpretation versus what we're doing. Is that correct?
Yeah, but the conversation goes both ways. So the conversation can go back both ways because, so let's just say that you want an interpretation of something. You can ask the Department of Education to interpretation. And if it's, yes, exactly.
It was for direct supervision covered with that.
And then, yeah, and but in that case, it was, that was something that clearly had to go through the regulation process to seek a definition for that. But conversation can go both ways, and has gone both ways. And so that's why I want to see them. And each time, the Board of Trustees are copied on these definitions.
we have the response. So I guess the question is, what happens when you are interpreting a definition? And I've seen the response that technology doesn't include something that it absolutely does. That's my question. Is there is a response that I've seen a response that says that the Department of Education doesn't think data dashboards fall under technology. That's actually in a response from them. However, I mean, as somebody who makes data dashboards for a living and works in IT, have like fundamentally disagree with that. So what happens in those instances? How are we supposed to address this disconnect if we can't even agree on this like very basic understanding?
Yeah, so there is more to that response and I don't know if everyone's about that response, but there is a lot more to that response.
Okay, so our data dashboard part of technology?
So it's all in that response.
So here's where I think the disconnect is that even though we're receiving the responses, we may not understand what that what exactly, is our next step. It's not that we don't understand the response, we do, we can read, I mean, that's my assumption, and, but it's that next step. So when we receive that response, if we disagree or we agree, what is that next step?
If we see this response and we think that it is not a correct response and we would like to have a conversation about that, just be nice, look that.
Yeah,
Put that in writing, because we also, like you, consult with our legal.
and so that, so it can be more collaborative rather than, okay, so this is what the state board says, we don't agree with it, so we're moving forward. Instead of doing that, we can say, okay, we don't agree with this, this is our interpretation, and this is the reason why. So for example, with data dashboards, if it's not considered a part of IT, our IT folks fall under central office. So if a school decides to have a different data dashboard, they decide, they have everything ever they want. I don't care, they even have me. So they have me, but there's something that goes wrong, and it goes out to the other schools that do not have the same data dashboard thing that is in this school, and it creates an issue. We don't know at the central office what this data thing is, so now we have to go out, find out what it is, and it creates an issue. So I'm just curious, in this process, is there a way that that the district, I mean, I know we have an interesting way of approving curriculum, but is it the same? Is it, and this is probably something I should ask the superintendent, but is it the same for everything, you know? I mean, because that's the thing. We see it as part of these things that we have to, under the law, pay for, take care of, maintain, and yet it seems optional. I guess that's my thought. Right?
Well, I think what Lisa says basically is that it undercuts the law based off the definition that you guys are giving us. And I think what a big concern of people that have seen it is that someone from your board or someone from your office will put this information out to constituents, and then they come to the board meeting and they scream at us because we're not compliant, even though the definitions you guys put out are different definitions of the law. This is how you interpret them. I don't know anything about data dashboards, but I believe Lola when she says, I live and breathe this for work. That she probably knows what data dashboards are much better than me, or works in project management. So I think that's kind of what that's saying too. That's what I'm getting from this. We're just undercutting the law a lot based off of your definitions.
Or what we're looking at it as, is this purely as a central office undertaking? Or is this something that the schools have to take care of? And then where do we intersect? I think that's also an issue. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, Lindsay. As long as you know what I'm doing.
I do have your. Okay, so it sounds like we could all benefit from having some definitions and coming to an agreement. I don't think we have to do that in this meeting. I just think it's important for you to understand what our perspective is. We're getting a response. And we read the responses. We are aware of the responses. We also are aware of many concerns of love. There definitely have been times where I know, like for instance, I read a survey that you presented that said something like the school wanted to have a central function and the board never heard it. So like in instances like that, I think sometimes people don't know how those things could also be heard. Because I know I have schools, for instance, that wanted a certain, they wanted a certain thing, they wanted to be included in a pilot or something, and it actually did come to the board. I don't know if they recognized it as it having come to the board, because it didn't come through like an SLA, it came through as part of the entire presentation about this one topic. And the board decided not to actually extend this to other schools. So I think sometimes it's a communication issue, and the fact that people might not recognize that it did come to the board, and it's just not like how it should. Does that make sense?
So. It's just mine.
Okay, Mark.
Good.
So getting back to the broad strokes.
Yeah.
Okay. From my perspective, you're looking at specific things, okay? And we have a spirit of the reorg. If you want to know how your district is doing, then you should be having agenda items soliciting input from your local precincts, okay? About where they are chafing, where do they feel that their decision making, because what I'm worried about is that the spirit gets lost in all this central office bureaucracy. And the intent is to understand the needs of local precincts and the decisions they're attempting to make and the problems they're having. Okay? Because, and this has always been a concern, is that we haven't seen the trustees doing this. Okay? Because this is the major revision of the district. How is it doing? Okay? The intent is to allow the local precincts to innovate. Are they innovating? What changes to the bureaucracy need to be made to allow them to innovate? What changes need to allow the parents and teachers to be heard? So you really don't have to just listen to us. And we've spent a year and a half listening to people complain about the bureaucracy. Okay? And there are times I feel like, well, that's really what the trustees should have been doing the last 5 years, is hearing what the problems are in this process. Okay? Because if the reorg due to the tangles of whatever the bureaucracy is, the district still loses. It still fails the test. And it's up to the trustees to have the intimate understanding of where are the pain points, right? This is a site-based decision model. How's it working? Were there innovations that needed to get spread around? Okay. So I guess individually, or at least I was hoping to have seen this and hoping to see it. Doing the same thing we're doing, right? If there's a problem, people are in your district to complain, you're not following the real law. You really don't have to wait for the state board to tell you. You could just hold some meetings and you get plenty of earful, okay, on what the problems are. Now, the trick is there's a lot of fear of retribution. And so you're going to have to create a safe environment for them to come speak. Because one, you want to know, is your bureaucracy ciphering the intent? Where's the knowledge? Because this really only works if the SOTs understand their role and their authority, right? Because they have authority that used to belong to the central office. They need to understand that in order to exercise it. And what decisions do they want? What authority they want? Because the intent of the law is you're now empowering your local precincts. Are you? Does it work? Is there something else they want to do? You've made big policy decisions. Did they have a better idea? Is there a way to customize it? How- you know,
Mark, can I ask you for clarification? Things that you're talking about are visionary in nature versus compliant in nature, right? There's nothing in this policy that says we have to do that. To make it work, we certainly need to do it, right? But is there something that you feel legally says those things are supposed to be, other than this annual survey?
There are many regulations, right? We've asked that the trustees get trained, because when the trustees say in a meeting that they don't understand, they receive
That's
no.
one trustee, so.
Yeah, I would just like to say, as soon as I got on the board, I got to turn on the phone.
So like, this is not an accurate representation of
There was one trustee out of 7 that said.
so, okay, training, for the trustees.
And then the requirement to put this on the agenda.
Right.
We invited you to a joint meeting to give you an opportunity to hear what we're hearing, okay? We're hearing the precincts complaining about the process. So, you don't have to wait, okay?
Understood. But
And you should not have been waiting. It should have been occurred the last 5 years. Okay?
we have tried many things over the last 5 years, and I would also like to illustrate it. Generally, when something is like really, really, really important to the community, it is more than 7%. There's 300 schools. It is not a representative sample for the amount of stuff that's bubbling up. Should we address it? Absolutely. Should we do this visionary work? Yes. I don't think that's the same argument as we're not in compliance with this. We haven't adopted your vision and we're not moving full steam ahead. I think those are two different arguments. Legally, being in compliance versus can you make this work and will you go above and beyond what this law says because that's what's required if you're actually going to make it work.
Okay. Then my response would be, if your driving philosophy is getting you a lot of traffic tickets, you can clear up those traffic tickets and no longer be in trouble with the law. But if your philosophy does not change, you're going to have more traffic tickets. So the message is that you need to be, we're trying to instill the spirit of the law. We're trying to move this down to you all so that the complaints of compliance, because as the situations come up about what the local decision makers want to be able to do, the freedom they want to have. Okay? If the spirit isn't there, if your philosophy of driving hasn't changed, you're going to get more tickets, so we're going to be doing this again. So the visionary work is what keeps you from having to do this again.
So when you say that, and we want to do this work, understand, I mean, as long as I've been on the board, we've been wanting to do this work. The thing that is holding us back right now is the fact that you have, and I was there, voted on it, the regulation for receivership. Because in that regulation, you said that we needed to be in compliance, or the receivership regulation was going to go into effect, right? And I know it has to go through a lot of different things, but we would like to make sure that even though you're going through all those different hoops, that never happens, right? That is our end game, that never happens. So that's why I think Lola is so focused in on the compliance, because that's the elephant in the room is the receivership language. And that's why it was important for us to meet with you to find out exactly what is it that you're looking at, that you're saying that we're not making an effort, we're not trying to be, we're not doing what we need to do to be in compliance, and that you felt that language was necessary.
Okay. Well, the first part is we're 5 years down the road.
Right.
So receivership regulations that occurred weeks ago have not prevented the Board of Trustees from doing these things.
saying we're 5 years down the road? Are we not taking into account the last 2 years? During COVID, and just, I mean,
I think
while I understand how a lot of time, what I think the district was more concerned with was getting education every student, keeping track of every student, making sure we had a 1-to-1 ratio when it comes to Chromebooks, things like that. I honestly, at that, I don't know, I guess to me, well, I understand what you're saying, right? Time-wise, yes, we've had the last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, whatever you want to call it, but to me, I don't know, I think there were bigger things going on. That's my opinion.
I think it might be important to bring this conversation around compliance with which one of these items here are bubbling up to the state? Or what items are bubbling up to the state that haven't fallen in one of these categories that we are legally responsible?
Well, I think we can go back
Yeah, we would,
and get you a list of your traffic tickets,
That would
we
be
would
great.
love our.
okay? I think the intent is not to put the district in receivership, okay? Because before these were laws and regulations, right? The state board wanted more authority over the district. We could have done it then. Now, our legal counsel, the state attorney general's office, says superintendent already has that authority. Superintendent, according to them, would put the district in receivership next week. But the intent is not to do that, right? The intent is to lay out this whole process. And state,
I think publicly you probably have a harder time doing that than, I don't think it's the board of trustees that's not getting public stuff.
I don't think receivership is really a topic for this group. I think that's something that our lawyers can definitely discuss because I think we definitely have a different conversation.
Again, we're talking about interpretations of the law. So that, I'd like to talk about it.
I'm not just waiting to
Yes, our court stuff.
So you look
I understand where it was, but what I'm trying to convey, trying to keep the spirit of what was intended so that the district does not fail the test, is what was the philosophy of what was the intent of the law. I think if you stay with that, then you stay out of terms.
okay, we want the traffic tickets though, because what if you have done a lot of extra work making some new regulations to threaten us with receivership for things that have no basis in authority or that something the district has in shoulder. So we would very much like those traffic tickets.
Well, I think we're
Perfect.
That's really.
Okay, that's a start, Travis.
That's a start. That's very-
Kelly, is there anything that you need to have been very quiet about? I'm so sorry. Next item, sit closer to.
I hardly know where it's appropriate for me to jump in. What resonated with me a lot so far has been the rhetoric about 5 years of doing nothing when that's not accurate. When we are, as far as we're concerned, down to 2, maybe 1, a last piece of compliance, global thinking excluded. There's frustration in misinterpretation, but by no means open defiance of compliance. Never has been, at least from the operational side. My job is to work in the details and get us compliant. We've been working for the whole time. Co-dependent excluded, and we'll continue to do that. My current status, as far as I'm concerned, is in the hands of Ms. Gonzalez right now, who I know is reviewing our assessment of compliance. We have yet to receive a finding from the current state superintendent. Have not received a finding since 2018 that precipitated the joint implementation plan. So we respond to questions and continue to state what our beliefs are, state our challenges. We continue to work toward those challenges and have continued to work toward those challenges. We will continue to do so. But the conversation around our refusal to work is false, and harmful. The added challenge of not knowing, officially what we're being held accountable for, in terms of what we've reached in terms of compliance with being myself down, but that's kind of where I'm at operationally. You all can see where the district believes we are in terms of compliance, which is much farther along than we were 5 years ago. So I don't even know how that rhetoric continues. It's a big law. We implemented a ton of it right away. That was hard work, really, really hard at the beginning. We flipped our whole work chart upside down, figuratively, literally. You guys can catch on figuratively. Eventually, I'm recognizing the first that we should this specifically. So,
I appreciate that. I know this is very frustrating work. I don't want you to think it's reflective. It sounds super easy, right? Hey, it's law, like, everybody just go through this. It actually is way more complicated than that. And I think it's important, that's why we map out what this looks like, because I do think that a lot of this happens behind the scenes. People don't see it, people don't know it. So it's very easy for you to exploit a narrative. And some of it is just not understanding definitions or having definitions. So I think that would benefit us. So if maybe next steps, if you guys want to that, or like
The state board would have to determine.
okay. All right. So if you would like to take this to the state board and make a plea for us, we would like to discuss this document here about these in compliance, and then also we would love those parking tickets. And we would. Is there anything else that you need, Kelly, so that we can?
I just wanted to get the cash for.
it's not coming out. I'm a very good partner. A little taller. Here's the bottom line for where I sit. It's not just about different interpretations of the law. There are parts of here of the things that the state board is working on that we're like, great, whichever way, great, just tell us so that we can put them on. And which would be wonderful. There are other things that where like Lola, you said, sound very simple. There's a million other things that it conflicts with. There's other laws that are in conflict. There's guidance from district court, with guidance from EMRP. None of it jives. So what we need to continue working and what we need to primarily focus on. It would be easier if we had more open, more trusting dialogue, and that's not hindered by a belief that we are not speaking truthfully in testimony, that we are purposefully not in compliance. I don't know how much of that is accurate and how much of that is my own perception. It could be. Those are the challenges that are in front of us now, outside of just the normal challenges.
What do you need from us? Do you need something from us for the skating, or would be helpful from this side of the table?
Well, since I have no problem.
Because she's all in the middle of, they're in the middle of supplanting from Clark County.
I still focus
That's a
on
state
broad
issue.
strokes. The intent of the law was to produce decentralized district, site-based decision. Does that sound like the Clark County schools?
There are some site-based decisions, but there are some decisions that the board has a fiduciary duty to oversee. So I guess it depends on how you define it, but it comes back to definition. Just to tell you with this site, have you ever actually gone to a site to actually leave a site? Would that be helpful?
We have members of our board that are. And their interpretations. Their experiences.
Yeah, maybe they'd like to.
we should have some members of SOTS come in and tell us how it works. I think that's a really good idea.
They're gonna be as we, so,
Yeah, but it's still a good idea.
oh, no, it absolutely, I'm
Like, really.
not thinking it's about the idea. But that is, maybe you hear from,
We did multiple SOTS.
I think- Well, it doesn't,
And why aren't they good? Why,
What's not good, and some are really active and some are really in.
yeah, and why?
why don't we start with step one?
Okay.
Well, I
This is funny.
have some and you can tell us with their interpretation and how it does.
And I share your numbers.
It was, I think it would be good.
Yeah. I do, for sometimes I don't actually communicate. They don't have this complaint, that's what I'm saying. But I'd love to hear from these other ones.
Well, I think, before we move on, I think it's important to reiterate how, much we are waiting for responses from the state superintendent on some communication with her. That accompanied this analysis. We had some requests for support, with regard to negotiations, with regard to.
So maybe like an update on
your interpretation of the executive team.
I mean, preferably, we would rather have a response by our next meeting, but at least an update. Can you verify which responses do you have received?
Because I think April 19th memo or letter from.
Okay. Thank you. Great.
So we're gonna, you want to go after? Okay, you know, part one. We have another section for public comment.
I just want to make sure that
It's not contract, no one.
So we will be in touch for another meeting with someone will be her and state board to. Whether it be.
You're asking me.
No, I'm asking you like the timeline is for, like, would it get the next agenda and when is the next meeting?
I can't even.
Do you think we could just send an informal invite to people on your board who are on school organizational meetings? My timeline for things, all of this.
Mhm.
That's too ambitious, Mark. You could send it to President Ortiz, and absolutely,
These are people who are stupid.
or or students.
They really believe they've been given some authority and they don't have the authority to transition the federal regulations. Nobody does.
Your timeline also.
Legislating from the bench.
And then we will be in touch for planning. Anything else?
The tickets, how long would it take for us to get a list of our tickets?
Mhm.
Do you think?
Could we get that like in meeting? Ideally, we would
Speak for
probably.
yourself.
Speak for yourself.
How long do you think it would take? Okay, all the
Could you put that in your request to President?
Ortiz? Okay,
And yeah,
I'll turn it to you. That's great. Okay.
all right, we will definitely all reach out to determine the next steps. We do appreciate, I know this was difficult.
They appreciate that advice, but they're not gonna take it, I promise you. Not with Lola on the board. They don't understand the responsibility with an IEP and a manifestation hearing and the transition of children without a manifestation hearing. Where's your data, boo?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, we are gonna close that item, but we do have a number of public items to speak on 5.1, public comment period on agenda items.
Mm.
not gonna come in. Were you?
Yeah, we do. That's next week, 4.01 first.
Oh, yeah. 4.01, next meeting is. The regular
Oh,
meeting on
lovely.
Thursday, May 19th, 2022.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you for that reminder. Now we're gonna go back to 5.1 for the agenda item. I believe, okay, can all the jury votes.
He said he was putting on the second part.
It's
There's a possibility, one extra minute, only because I added a couple of questions with my list.
we will allow this.
It's informal enough.
All right.
Could you provide that
They need everything in writing.
Ignorance. Principal W9 middle school, precincts or saws. Another complaining or issues absolutely started with the district before resorting to ending with any board. Just want to put that out there.
Put it out
And
there.
one of the issues is how do we address the differences between central and site-based administrators when they're busy?
Yeah, how do they address those differences?
What will give them that a law change? Say. Okay, when Mindy and the Nevada Board of Education asked for a site-based perspective as well as a central-based perspective on the implementation status of the decentralized governance model or law, the magnitude of change still needed came into focus. Site-based principals, local thoughts, and CABs were asked to make presentations to NDE and the Board of Education on June 3rd, 2021. Over the months, the overwhelming majority of members have concluded that CCSD central administration is not aligned with the law and
They
seek
are not.
to be their own final authority on the
Those
intent
temporary
of
teachers and they kick
implementation
back
of
of the
Last
$50,000
week on May
in
11th,
the higher
CCSD
poverty
Chief
schools is a real
Strategy Officer
issue.
Carol Hall at the
Kickbacks.
NDA
It's called
regulation workshop
supplanting.
stated our county school district has substantially complied with the provisions of NRS 388G and disputes the defamatory rhetoric that declares the district
NRS
is an open
388G.
legislature. Later in her
Little
statement,
G.
this rhetoric has fueled the development of proposed regulations that represent an overreach beyond the authority of the state board. The NRS 388G.580 says the superintendent of public instruction shall take such actions as being necessary and appropriate to ensure that each large school district carries out the organization of the school district in accordance with NRS 388G.500 through 810 inclusive and any regulations adopted pursuant thereto. From CCSD's Chief Strategy Officer statements of defamatory rhetoric and state overreach, it seems likely that the suggested strategy may be an illegal battle. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Do we have any other members of the public?
Well, you know. And then I can make a copy of the stuff that I'm gonna say to you others, right?
Go to the podium. Don't talk from your seat. You know how they
I
advertise
was
this
just gonna
meeting.
put this on Tuesday, no, 201, 301, that five. Yeah, 201.
It is, but we're gonna allow special circumstances and we'll just remember next time.
Thank you. First time I think ever in 15 years I've ever asked for much.
I'm gonna give it to you, Brian, for Sandy's.
You know, on campus.
Oh, Tampa.
I've been on this along, since the beginning. And I have this tendency to sometimes be in the right place at the wrong time, at the wrong place at the right time, depending on your perspective. I have heard conversations in bathrooms with people pushing AB 469 when it was the other law before that. I've overheard conversations in hallways that I was not supposed to hear, and I've been approached in parking lots of this law. And told basically, you better support it and go along with it, or you're gonna be sorry. So, intent of the law, and that particular person, I think the intent was to get more money for his employee group. Some of the intent of the law, I believe, was to union bust, which I was totally against. We talk about the children. I worked with children for 24 years, okay? I think a lot of the stuff that we're arguing about is not really about the children. I think it's about the adults. And I'm grateful that I have a union that has fought for my rights as an employee. You can't say CCSD isn't trying to comply with the law because I've lost 2 positions and taken a 20% pay cut because of that. I do believe, though, that the unions can work together. And I really think that we need to have all of us get in an informal conversation. We don't have all the rules, we're not allowed to say this, we've got time limits, but we need to be honest. We really need to be honest. We're not, so I appreciate everybody being here. But there are two perspectives. There's one perspective that this is a vision, this is great for the kids. I'm in a classroom every day. I'm working with kids for 24 years at CPSD. Okay, and all the things I've seen, really haven't seen a lot of change in the classroom, except I've seen less. I've seen less and less and less and less than ever. But I would like to suggest that you get the union heads and a couple of union members and a couple of non-union members in each category, administrators, teachers, support staff. And we did a town hall one time where that was allowed to be done. You gotta hash it out. We're doing all this political stuff, politically correct, we're doing lots of cool stuff. And I do believe in the law, but the law is up for interpretation in so many areas. The law is words, the written words, and words can be interpreted in 100 different ways, depending on your intention. And I don't believe everybody's intention is as pure as they say. And I really think that that needs to be put out there, because everybody's dancing around. I'm not gonna dance around it, I'm getting too old, too tired, and I've been to too many meetings for everyone. I also offer to anybody who wants to reach out on this or any other CCSD thing, or to just have a rough day, call me, look me up. I am so easy to find. And I am really. I like to talk, I like to hash things out, I like to communicate, I like to compromise.
She likes to talk. She might be the only one.
And I.
Are you 3 minutes too? Yeah. Oh, okay, sorry, I'll try to do that. I do also then. I've attended just about every state meeting I possibly can. I think I've only missed one of the last 2 years. I think I've only missed one of your guys's. There's meetings that I'm in, but sometimes I'm the only one there. I'm the only one watching what's going on. I'm the only one looking at it going, hey, wait a minute or not. Why am I getting people to comment? Because I say things out loud because people don't read, people aren't following me. But as annoying as I am, I do that because not everyone can attend. Not everyone, I hear this a lot from a lot of parents, like they're so stressed out raising their kids, working or keeping a roof over their head, that until it like is super bad, they don't have time to speak their voices. So even the community meeting we did last night virtually, that wasn't a community meeting. That was a one-way direct conversation out to the public. That lasted, I think, all like 5 minutes. Like that wasn't a community meeting. So I don't know what next piece is gonna look like, but we can't, so the people who show up to the state are the same people who prioritize being the voice for the people who do fear retaliation and who don't have time to drive all the way to Vegas or Reno or, you know. So it always does appear there's the same group of us show up and show up. But we show up because we're following, we're listening. And I'm gonna reiterate something that I said at the very beginning of the year, the first meeting that you guys had. The change that I think we all need and want to see for the children is not going to come from anyone on our, and no offense, NDE, although there's really great work going on below. But our legislature is going to figure it out. So again, we gotta set a bunch of stuff aside and move forward. For us. And they need to do it for us if we think that we're gonna be here in another 5 years having the same conversation when we get new trustees in January.
You getting adult 3 minutes?
Get it? That I'm not gonna be there tomorrow night. Families that are on phase 2 of the COSAs that they may or may not hear about getting those approved before August. And many are starting to make alternative plans like charter schooling because they need to have their kids settled and know where they're going to school in August. And I really don't want to see us lose more kids because they can't get like a click button back, you're accepted response. They got someone to continue.
Thank you. Any other members of? the
Yeah, one more.
You can
Four
work.
o'clock, I do not have the yellow card. I'm
Carrie,
Carrie.
come over here.
I will do that.
Carrie Conference Director, at 4 o'clock during this meeting and at 4:15 during this meeting, the first time Bruce looked out there, who else was doing this, the second time, you two were exchanging notes. I put in public comment for those notes. I want to make sure that you do not destroy those notes, or you can just share them with us now. I'm not afraid to that when we need it. And so it's in public meeting, I'd like to see those. I'll show them to you. I have.
She wants to know what they were talking about.
Say that one?
I'll show them, I'll give them to the look.
If you would like to have a conversation.
I would like to.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, that is, any other members of the panel? No, that's gonna close this public comment period. We're going to move to adjournment. Trustee Katie?
Well, I would make a motion to adjourn this subcommittee. Guess who's second?
Okay, all right. Motion
Motion
by
to
trustee
adjourn.
Williams, a second by trustee Guzman. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. That motion carries 3-0. This meeting is adjourned. Time is 4:40.
Okay. Was that interesting? I found it very interesting. I thought it was hilarious. It's just amazing how reality really sets in and people understand that perhaps they didn't have that power at all. No one has the power to configure the regulations of the federal government. No matter how you get the work done, it's just your requirement to get the work done. So how are you measuring your progress? Well, you will have some data. Maybe it's not what the data that the feds will be looking for, but no waivers are coming. So we'll see as we wait on the waivers, how that works for Nevada. Because you can see these people just chose not to implement AB 469. Y'all should read that bill. They just kept on allowing teachers to have choice and not to work with the children who were generating those federal allocations because they didn't have to work with them. It's a choice. Do you understand choice and power? Now you understand, but guess what? Understand ultimate power is the parents, goes to the people. What is your local control? How many people actually participate in the lack of outcomes and lack of maintenance of effort? Well, we will see.